record. Giving it a minute just in case. I think we're all right. I think we're all good. I swear these Zoom recordings start really well because there's always me going, we are recording, right? That's it. That's the button going. Good. Right. Hi, guys. Welcome back to Views of Verse on my channel. And today I have the great pleasure of interviewing Mr. E.A Koetting of Become a Loving God. He's one of the co-founders. So hi, and welcome to my channel.
Hello, thanks for having me on. No, I'm glad that we get a chat one-on-one without the other guy there chirping away. So yeah.
You just said his name. You know what happens now, right? Speak of the devil and he shall appear. That's what I've come to expect from Darren. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to be chatting around the concepts of something which I know EA has promoted a lot throughout his career, and it's something that really, really, truly excites me. It's the idea of kind of shaping your own path, molding your own path. And with a lot of the people I interview, they tend to get into this box-like thinking where they're like, right, I am a Celtic this, or I am a Nordic that, and that's it. And I must stick to it, and I must never look outside of it, and I must never evolve even. And EA is one of these people who doesn't think like that. You kind of evolve and take what works for you and adapt as time goes by. So do you want to talk a little bit about, has that always been the case? Have you always been like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it's perfectly understandable that people do that. It is a natural and even a biological thing that drives people to, for the sake of protection and procreation, to stick with a tribe. And the tribe will protect you and provide for you and all of that. So I understand that, but at the same time, there's got to be a divorce from that, just like we've divorced ourselves from a lot of our biological or primitive impulses. You know, that we don't go smashing each other over the heads with rocks anymore. Now, so the next step in evolution I think is the dissolution of separateness. Mm-hmm. That you know, on a lot of levels, and we're getting there with technology. We're getting there with even just our spiritual connection and communication with each other. But so I think it is inevitable that people move out of that in-group, out-group mentality. I think our very survival as a species requires it, because honestly, the only threat to mankind is mankind.
Oh, right.
So yeah. I mean, that we know of.
That we know of, yeah. I was thinking Little Green Men myself.
Yeah,
I was waiting for it.
We just had some interesting disclosures in the U.S. with the Department of Defense releasing that they've had this $20 billion project or some crazy number of money that they've invested into searching after the truth about UFOs or whatever. So anyways, so we might not be the only threat out there, but at this moment, we are a very clear threat to ourselves, and we have been, and it is because of that in-group, out-group thing. To take that to the level of, I think, spirituality and magic, especially when you're dealing with magic versus religion, which magic would be your own personal connection and connectedness to that energy and to the world and nature and all of that. That's all part of magic. Any truly transcendental thing, I think, it does dissolve the boundaries between people, between differences, all of that. And magic is the same. Now, have I always been like that, to actually get around to answering your question after rambling? I think I always have been. And I don't know, maybe it's, I had some pretty intense trauma in my early childhood, and had issues adjusting and adapting and whatever. I had no problem making friends, but I always knew I wasn't one of them, like that I was somehow different. And I think that sense of kind of like a
otherness,
of abuse, neglect, the whole everything that falls out of there kind of did separate me just a bit from the rest of I think from all the tribes that I kind of had. I was somewhere in the middle, and so I don't think I've ever felt like that's been available to me.
Mm.
to be part of somebody's tribe. Now that's my own insecurity, absolutely, because I know I can jump into any party and be perfectly invited and welcomed. But it's just not interesting to me.
Mm.
It never has been. And so, yeah, so I think, it's interesting that you asked that because that does bring up, I mean, a lot of the things that I think motivate, we have no idea what motivates us, honestly. Like, there's so much that's going on as a subroutine that only after the fact can you go, oh, wow.
Yeah, hindsight 2020, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
It's interesting because anyone who's been on this channel for a very long time knows that I talk about abuse in childhood because it's something that I've been through too. And it's interesting how you talk about the idea that you start off with kind of like a survival mentality, like I don't belong to this group of people, and there's a little bit of that survival mentality that comes in. And then as you kind of grow and evolve and adapt, you're like, but the only way that we can actually become truly empowered is through realizing that we're not separate from other people. So it's interesting how that kind of survival mentality kind of takes on a new way of looking at the world, where you realize that actually the separateness is kind of damaging to that connectivity in a way. Like, the more that you close off and shelter from people, the less you can reach out and realize we're not as separate as we think we are. So that's really interesting. Become a Living God kind of talks about this path of empowerment. And I wonder whether or not that you've seen this with a lot of people. They get quite guarded and kind of quite territorial with their own power. Because when you're talking about empowerment and spirituality and realizing there's no separateness and the only way forward is together, that's kind of inclusive. And I think a lot of people, when they're talking about like gaining the power, it kind of becomes like a self-centered thing. And like, if I have the power, then no one else can have it. So how do you kind of like...
Well, there's a great written work out there called Power versus Force. And the concept itself is pretty amazing. I mean, okay, so I gotta say, I'm just gonna throw this out to the world. Stop abusing children. Like, right. Really, if we can do one thing to change the world overnight, stop abusing children.
Right. Yeah.
And so with that said, I know that as I went after Satanism and black magic, my first thing was I was trying to make up for lost power. Make sure that I goes even I got really into strength training and muscle, just building as much muscle as I could. And I went and saw a yogi. I finally reached my breaking point. This was about a year before my divorce with my wife, and after that, my whole life has changed radically. But I went and saw this yogi because I tried everything I could to try to fix my psyche, and I tried all of the magic. I'd gone as deep and as dark as I could, and I'd gone as light as I could, but I was still just off. And so I go to this yogi as kind of a last ditch effort, and he does some energy clearing on me. And that works amazingly. But then we sit after my energy is clear and kind of just had a conversation about where, what I really wanted in life and what I was doing, what was motivating. And he says, you're massive. And I was pretty big at the time because I was just straight into bodybuilding. A couple hours a day in the gym every single day, taking every kind of supplement I could. I was one step away from starting to do steroids to get myself bigger. Mm-hmm. And he goes, look, what are you doing with all that muscle, bud? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, what's that serving? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I'm a painter. He goes, do you really need that much muscle to paint? I'm like, not really. He goes, no, this is so you can be so powerful that no one can ever hurt you again. And I had to sit with that and go, wow, that summarizes a lot of it. Now, along the way of trying to find this lost power, I stumble across magic. And I mean, it was the answer that I was looking for that, for sure. But then it unfolded a whole world of self-evolution that I don't think I wasn't seeking, and I maybe wasn't even prepared for, because as soon as I actually started investing myself into this spirituality, I started having the trauma surface, and I had to start dealing with that. Started having memories coming back and all of that. And I'll tell you what, so as far as people guarding their power, they're not talking about power, because power really I would equate with autonomy. that you are doing exactly what you want to be doing. You are doing your will. You look at Crowley's, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Now that's not saying do whatever you want. It's do your will. And you can't know your will as long as you got all of these unconscious impulses nagging at you. And so quieting that down, you start to realize that your power, the power that we share is so immense that it'll never be used up. And the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Not just in yourself, but in the field of magic itself. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And so the more people that we can get to jump on board actually activating these powers in themselves and this connection with their spirituality, the field of magic, the tangible electrical power that you can pull from the air and use in ritual and bring through your body is amplified. And I've seen that myself. I mean, as I've been pushing this forward, people are scared because their in-group is very important to them. And feeling special within that in-group is important to them. And that's cool. And once again, that's kind of the leftover evolutionary stuff that we're still working through. But I get it. But it's a false notion that needs to be challenged. Just like you have to challenge in yourself. Well, do I really need to pursue having power over others, or should I pursue having power over myself? And so yeah.
You're singing my song. So for anybody who's watching this later at a date, I will say right here, anybody who's been through abuse, anybody who's going through abuse, okay, so magic can be a sort of a comeback line, and it is for a lot of people. A lot of people start down the magical path because they need order, they need structure, and they need empowerment, and it can absolutely help you with all of those things as you go on through. But you are not the sum of your abuse. So for anybody who's watching this, you can get past that. You can keep evolving past that, and it doesn't have to be the thing that defines you and breaks you, and you can move past that. It will slowly happen. It will slowly start to heal, and you may not ever forget it, but at least you can move past the point where it's having a conscious effect on you and even a subconscious effect on you on a regular basis, and then you kind of push past that even more. So that's just for someone else, just for people who are out there after the fact.
Well, something I'd like to maybe add to that, if you don't mind, is sure. Running away from it is not the answer.
No.
You do have to look at, square in the face, and maybe even, I myself have, I've hired a good therapist that I can sit down with and in confidence say, this happened to me. And that is, I think, the hardest part. And then once you do that, you can then have power over it. This is one of the things Azazel taught me. I asked him how to create a spirit. And he says, really, all you need to do is come up with an idea of what that spirit is going to do and then name it. And once you name something, you then have power over it. You can't heal a disease until you name the disease, because then you begin to identify it. And so once you've named and given, given a reality to anything that has happened, you can then take power over it. And allow yourself to start the healing process, but you have to. I'll tell you what, it is miserable, as I'm sure you can agree with me on. It's miserable to confront yourself in that way, and I mean, because and so first off, if you've been abused, you most people tend as children to blame themselves for it and take on some of the the responsibility for that, and obviously you're not responsible for it as a child.
I will add right there that a lot of abusers encourage that as well. A lot of abusers mentally manipulate people, and children in particular, to think it's their fault. And if they speak up, then terrible things will happen. So there can be an element of overcoming the conditioning there too. So I'll just add that in there.
Absolutely. But then going forward as an adult, though, it becomes more and more your responsibility, because here's why. If you look at somebody who is an abuser, who has abused a child, almost every single time they themselves were abused. Now, the only way to stop that cycle is to go, okay, so this horrible thing has happened to me, and now I've got to really process it and deal with it. Because if you don't, pushing it back and running away from it is not the answer. But that's, I mean, look, abuse is and especially of a, any kind of sexual nature or any kind of abuse on a child is disgusting. But it is. We can see that it's so much a part of our reality, of our society. Like it is disgusting to see how many how many Me Too's there are, and I'm part of that Me Too campaign. And it's like, what? Wow, we can stop this. And so this is one of the things that my aim when I started writing books and putting them out to the public, and when I started doing interviews, I was doing radio interviews before I was even a published author. I was just trying to get out there and talk to people and just connect with people. It was always with the idea that if we come together, we can change the world for the better. Mm-hmm. That we can put our power together and start pushing things in a positive direction. And so everybody's going to define what the new world should look like. But really, what we need to do is take account of our own realities, our own little microcosm. What can I do? What choices can I make today that I can make my life better and my life improve and myself improve? And I think, if you put magic towards that, and you put your, you can't just do a spell and hope things happen. Mm-hmm. Do the spell, do the ritual, do the meditations, and then follow it up with action and follow it up with, maybe some soul searching, or maybe even looking outside of yourself for help if you need that. Mm-hmm. But all of these things, it's like, I've got people who will come to me for healing rituals, and I say, I'm happy to do that, and at the same time, you need to be seeing a physician. Like this is, I'm not. You've got to be taking action on all levels, and so yeah.
Yeah, I've just been writing a book about healing work with Owen, so tree medicine, and I'm doing that at every step, like. But you must seek a physician's advice as well, and you must seek counselling if you need it as well, because I think people get down the rabbit hole of magic is going to fix me, and it's like magic is not going to fix you. Magic is a tool. Magic is an extension of who you are, just like all these other tools that you have available at your disposal. So why focus on one when you can paint with all the colours, kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. I also wonder if more people kind of realize that the power versus like the sheltered thing. If more people realize that we actually empower by realizing we're not separated, that would very, very likely decrease abuse in all forms. Because if we're not separate from someone else, then we take on that empathy, we take on that realization that, by hurting ourselves and hurting them, then we're hurting humanity in general. And it's interesting you said about the abusers carrying on the cycles and things, because it's funny, because my mother actually said to me, like, oh, well, he was abused as a child, as if it's an excuse. I've heard this. And I was like, well, he should know better then.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, exactly. Well, and so, I mean, once again, we as children, you're not responsible for the things that happen to you, but for anything in life, you're responsible, especially as you become more and more conscious of it. You're responsible for what you do with that. Mm-hmm. For me, and I would even venture a guess that for you, although this was a horrible experience, it's also a defining experience, and has shown you your strengths in ways that you couldn't have known, and has opened you to empathy. Mm-hmm. And that's I'll tell you what, that is the huge missing key is empathy. And even though I'll tell you what, even though like I always did feel like an outcast, the empathy has always been there, and probably too strong most of the time.
Yeah, in some cases.
Yeah.
When you're like, I know you're being an asshole, but I can kind of see what's going on, but you're still being an asshole. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and And you know, like I was mentioning yesterday as I was doing my live cast is oh, I forgot where I was going with that.
Is it Darren? Is he around in the ether?
I bet he's poking at me astrally or something.
Yeah. You were talking in the live stream yesterday about something that kind of feeds into this, which is something that really interests me, is kind of like the responsibility of shaping one's own path and deepening the understanding. And you've done this a lot with different path workings that you bring to the world, even when people are trying to stop you bringing it to the world. And so how do you feel that that's really important? It's like looking at different ways of practicing magic and sort of moving past, again, these kind of box-like thinkings. Like I know for Voodoo, for example, you came into a lot of the racism that comes through with people who are not of that descent practicing. And I think it comes up quite a bit in the Nordic stuff, which is something you've just released too, right?
Yeah, you know, and I think it's going to come up in just about everything. Curtis Joseph had problems with it because people from the Middle East were saying, "Oh, you're just some white guy from U.S. that whatever." It's once again that's just the leftover in group out group herd mentality. It's not concerning to me. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. While I'm doing my live cast yesterday, that I'm seeing people with a thumbs upping and hearts going across the screen, and then I've got angry faces going across the screen. I'm like, you took the time out of your day to angry face. Yeah, to angry face me, to let me know, and I love it. Like, thank you for paying attention. Like, no matter what you're feeling about it, thank you for paying attention.
Yeah, that's some energy exchange right there.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, but it is it's hard to I've just had to not pay any attention to the death threats and all of that. It's. At first it got pretty concerning. When people really started rallying against me, like I had to go file stalking injunctions, and I had to have an attorney actually go start filing lawsuits against people, and some of those were successful, and some people were arrested and whatever, and it's like, oh man, that my girlfriend, I started having somebody with my girlfriend basically at all times, just It got a little hairy, but I think maybe that was more my paranoia than the real threat, because the truth is that internet trolls are internet trolls. That's where they have power, and that's where they stay. Mm-hmm. But they are very helpful. But anyways, yeah. Once again, I ignore the racism for the most part. I unfortunately have to address it every now and again when it gets to be pretty intense. I've got to say, look, I've got to make that line in the sand very clear. I don't care what your ethnicity is. I care what your energy is. You're a God embodied. That's all I need to know. And yeah, as far as why it's important. It is, you're able to see things, I think, from different perspectives when you obviously different perspectives. With Haitian Vodun, I was used to calling up the spirits in front of me and having this whole ceremonial formality to the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then with Vodun, I'm jumping into it going, oh, I've got to dance, which that was an unknown thing to me at that point in my life.
Like, you did not look impressed then.
Oh man, and I'll tell you what. Like at this point, if a song comes on, you can't stop me from dancing. But at that point in my life, I was just way too repressed to let loose. But you've got to, I had to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. Similar thing with like the Caesar rite in the Viking. The Norse tradition of getting yourself into that deepest shamanic state. It does require letting yourself go in a very particular way. And so yeah, it's kind of like you get to experience, because it's the same power, right? So once again, it's one big field of magic that all of these different systems are tapping into. So you just get a different perspective, a different vantage, and I mean, if you can learn how to take and mold this power in different ways. I mean, I don't. That sounds like that's perfect. That sounds like that's exactly that. And eventually, at the end of the day, so people ask me, well, so do you still practice Vodun? Yeah, I do. I mean, I've taken that and I've mixed it into my own personal field of work. Same thing with this Norse tradition. For this last year, that's been pretty much all I've practiced. And now that the path working's over, I'm taking all of those things I learned and I'm putting them into the pot of everything that I'm now capable of. And that's to me, that's awesome. It's a lot. Doing a single path working, most people won't really do a single path working in their entire lives, really. Unfortunately, those who do, no, man, you're with me, and I consider you a brother or sister, because buckling down and actually putting your comfort, on the back seat, and making some adjustments in your life, your way of life, your discipline, the way that you perceive things. I'll tell you what, working through this Norse tradition, I've had to perceive things differently. I mean, so like in a lot of the different schools of esoteric thought, in meditation, that you shut your mind out from the outside world. And in the Norse tradition, it's the exact opposite. You go sit out in the forest and let nature speak to you. And so it is a complete shift. And I think that's one of the most important things. It's like, I've made this analogy before, but when you're trying to build muscle, you've got to do new things to make that muscle actually grow.
Yeah, find the point of resistance and push past it in different ways. Sure, that's cool. It's interesting as well, because you're talking about through the different path workings, it's basically finding different areas where you're resistant to something, or where you're like shirking away from something, and that would be with the dancing, and then a different kind of meditation with the Nordic. And it actually is opening you up to all these different experiences, these different ways of living, these different ways of channeling and vibrating, I guess. And that's kind of like pushing ascent. So that's really interesting. Also, I will mention at this point that from a historical point of view, all people are considered to have started in one place originally. they all trace us back to Africa from a anthropomorphical, can't say it, English perspective. They were all supposed to trace back to Africa. So again, the decision become
well, and I'll tell you what, then, and that is where people start getting maybe a little crazier than I like to engage them in, is because then it turns out that we're actually two entirely different species that were planted here by different alien races. Right. That I mean, the theory goes nuts at that point. So I mean, I've got to agree that I haven't traveled the world in big ways, but I mean, I've been to Spain, and I've been to a couple places in Europe, and all over the United States and Canada. And I mean, for the most part, wherever you go, people are people. Like, I mean, where the consultations, I do consultations with people on every single continent, and people are people. So all of the background kind of stuff about that's not. I mean, it's not interesting, and the people who are very interested in talking about it are not the people that I'm very interested in talking
to. No. There is a level of we've had this conversation before.
Yeah.
So how did the Nordic pathworking go? Because that's the most recent one. Have you been enjoying that?
I enjoyed it immensely. I'll tell you what, it was a pretty good healing experience for me, for sure. I came out of doing a lot of dark works. I did the Black Magic mastery course, and so for a year just did everything black magic and demonic, and then went from that into doing S. Ben's Lovecraft course, and then voodoo. And so that was a lot of darkness. That was a lot of heavy darkness. And I'll tell you what, even just being able to get outside and get out of the temple, and I hardly filmed anything here in the temple. I would get out into the forest, go up into the mountains. That in itself was a completely different, refreshing thing. And that's another thing, so some people don't have access to natural areas, I guess, and that sucks. I intentionally don't live in a place that I couldn't access nature. But I think it is really important to get into nature. Even if you have to make a pilgrimage out of it, even if you have to maybe take a couple days to drive somewhere. In almost every single tradition, when you go on an initiation quest, a spirit quest, or a walkabout, or whatever, when you're doing something that is going to give you the answers that you need, you have to travel. There is always travel involved. And I mean, you can drive, you can walk, but there's got to be some sort of pilgrimage. And a big part of that, I've got this in-person training boot camp thing that I offer, so people can come out here and I'll work with them. And I insist that they come to me. I've had people offer to fly me out to wherever they're at and put me up in a hotel and whatever. And I've got to turn them down because I want them to leave their environment. This is one of the biggest things. I mean, even if you look at it through the lens of like neurolinguistics programming and hypnosis, if you want to change somebody's state, the way that you can do that is to change their environment. When my daughter was a baby, I'd be holding her and she'd be crying, and I could walk around the living room all day and she would just keep crying. As soon as I'd go step out into the cold outside on the balcony, all of a sudden, wait a minute, something changed, and then her state would change. So if you can change your location, your environment, and go somewhere that is that is special. I mean, nature is very, very special, and it always has been. Like, even when people were living in huts in the middle of nature, they would still go to the more beautiful places in nature to worship. But anyway, so it's been a revitalizing experience for sure. Really super positive. And I had actually started my own path working about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, in the Norse tradition. And so this was a really awesome way to kind of make it official and do a full path working out of it, really invest myself in it. And no, it was really, really, really cool. Positive experience all around, healing, physically, emotionally, mentally. Like, in every way, my quality of life has gone off the charts this last year. And I do think I have to give credit to involving myself with something with such a positive, I think, force. So.
I love the whole going out into nature to. It's like finding yourself. It's interesting because they've even proven in terms of scientific evidence now that it changes your biorhythms, it changes your chemical makeup to be out in nature, it changes you to be away from like artificial light and technology for a time. And it's interesting again how it's one of those tools that changes your magical perception, because you're using that biorhythm, using that change in state to elevate your spiritual, elevate your magical, and change you on the inside. I have to say the Nordic pantheon has a special place in my heart because it's always hilarious when they get involved. So my sister followed Nordic pantheon for most of her life, and I kind of knew about it without being part of it. And then every time I've had an influence of a Nordic god, Loki, my life has become a mess, Loki, and it's all this kind of craziness that starts happening, Loki. So the first time this started happening to me is that different men were turning up and like coming and talking to me, and they were all involved with Loki, every single one of them. And it ended up being Darren was working with Loki at the time, and that ended up being a journey. It ended up moving and changing my entire life. So I can totally see about the journey element that kind of calls when you're working with a Nordic pantheon, but that there's something very, like, they are all wanderers, they're all adventurers. That spirit kind of lives on within the magic, within the theology even, and they all went traveling and adventuring and seeking new lands. So it's interesting that kind of echoes through into modern practices and magical reclamations in a way.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
cool.
You know, with a lot of the video courses I'll put out, I usually make a ritual of some sort available, you know, as a, you know, an upsell that you know, you bought the course, would you like me to perform this ritual to, you know, focus these powers on you? And every time I do, or to call this particular being or whatever, every time I do, people, I mean, have amazing results with it. And so it's something that I keep making available. And Timothy hit me up, my partner at Become Living God, texted me, and he says, you know, do you want to do a ritual to invoke Loki into people's lives? And yeah. And I mean, I'll tell you what, and there was the black magician in me was like, yes, I do. But I had to kind of pull the reins back and go, wait a minute, what's going to be best for the people who, I mean, you know, anybody can hire me to do a ritual. And if you want me to do a ritual for Loki, that's fine. But I'm not going to recommend it. Wow. Every time I've worked with Loki, my life has been turned upside down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in good ways. You know, this is the thing. Loki in the mythology, he goes and screws with everybody. He's always up to trouble, but his trouble is always a revelation. It teaches you something about the gods. Mm-hmm. That is the role of the adversary. Now, invoking him in your life, I mean, you're probably not, I mean, at least what I've seen, I don't like what he shows me, but you know, once you see it, then you know, you can, I mean, at least for me, I've got to do something about it and go, oh, okay, that's where I'm lacking. I mean, because I'll tell you what, like this is probably the hardest part of practical magic. So you do the spell, you put it out there, and the opportunities start to come and things start to change. Most of the time, in order for you to get the full success you're looking for, you're probably going to have to sacrifice something. And usually whatever you sacrifice is usually going to be the very thing that's holding you back from what you're truly wanting. Yeah. And most people are aware of that. And they look at it and go, oh, I've got to do that. Oh, now I know. And a lot of people just don't have what it takes to follow through and go, okay, cool. But when it becomes clear to you, especially after you've done magic for something, if it becomes clear to you that you need to drop something and change your life, I'm going to tell you that the change is going to happen either way. It's going to be better for you to, rather than trying to rearrange furniture on the Titanic while it's sinking, maybe, get
off the boat.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. which is hard because, I mean, I am under the thorough conviction through my experience and knowledge and seeing other people's experience that magic actually works. It actually puts into effect something that is very mysterious. Mm-hmm. I can't even pretend to know exactly how it works. I just know that it somehow does. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you it's a whirlwind that starts in your life. There are vortexes all over the place in the physical world, and even the chakras are themselves vortexes. Mm-hmm. And so as you do a ritual, a vortex opens up and it starts spinning and spinning and spinning, and your whole life gets really screwed up for a second. Now, once again, the task of the magician is to look at that, not become attached to any of it. Everything is still in motion. It's going to land where it needs to be, and just deep breath and breathe out and let it go. Yeah, you know, I've got a good friend that was over last night for a Christmas party we had here, and she's a year and a half out of prison, and she was in prison for a few years. She did a ritual to Kali, and sacrificed an animal, and they did a blood sacrifice to Kali to change her life. She was involved in the drug scene, and the drug scene led into all kinds of a whole dark world that she was enmeshed in, and she couldn't get out. Mm-hmm. And so she did this invocation of Kali to turn it all around for her. And then she gets arrested and was in prison for several years. And she's fighting it the whole time, you know, trying to, and really she was arrested initially for some drug charges, but then they found out that the country she had immigrated from no longer existed. That it was part of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union first fell apart, it had a couple, these satellite countries that developed that then got overthrown or whatever. The government changed, so she was stuck kind of in the system in prison. And I'm talking to her about it and going, wow, like, how do you not just lose your shit and go, Kali, you screwed me here? And she goes, well, no. She goes, the entire time that she was in her prison cell, she knew that was the full success was still manifesting, and that was part of it. I'm like, wow, that is ridiculous. But I mean, and hopefully that's people's problems aren't that intense that magic is going to find that route, and you can guide it for sure. You can if you're aware of the possibilities, go, okay, so help me out in this way. If you leave it a little too open, sometimes the power takes license.
Resistance. We're going to tear your house down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carly will do that. I can see that really clearly. Carly just being like, right, we'll remove you from every temptation for 2 years then. And then you can start over, burn it all down, start all over again. I can see that. I can totally see her doing that. That's that goddess energy for you right there. Exactly. I totally understand how people are resistant to change, though. I was resistant to change for a long time. I didn't want to do it. I was like, I know I need to do it, but I don't want to do it. Do I have to do it? Yes, you do. And you can only get to a certain point. And you're trying to grow and you're trying to grow and you're trying to grow and you're hitting that wall. You're like, if you want to change, if you want to keep growing, you gotta break that wall down. And nothing you do until you break that wall down is going to allow you to move on to the next part. So I can totally see that.
And from my own experience, like a few years back, I had a 3 a.m. awakening. I just woke up at 3 a.m. for no reason and felt Azazel's presence there and tuned into that. And he told me, "You're getting a little carried away with the drugs, son. You might want to put that away." And I said, "That's not important." I said, maybe I'm just imagining this.
Oh, no.
Maybe that really wasn't.
Did you challenge him?
Not in the moment. I said, okay, I'll take that into consideration, sir, and then went about my merry way. And indeed, he was right. Honestly, I think drug use is just fine as long as you're being responsible, and it's a positive experience. At that point, it maybe had gotten to be not a great positive experience, and so maybe a change was needed. And I said, no, I'll be all right. And then it was a couple weeks later, get arrested for drug possession. Then I spent 3 years magically fighting that, legally fighting that, but in the meantime, cleaning myself up. I mean, it was exactly what I needed. Now, the easy route would have been going, oh yeah, you're right, I have a problem that I need to address, and addressing it directly in the moment of that realization. But yeah, human nature, it doesn't want to change. We go, no, I'll put it off. That's too uncomfortable. But especially when you're working in the field of magic, you can't presume that things are just going to that your problems are just going to fall away. Like that's actually, from what I've seen, all of your problems when you're active in your spirituality come to the surface. I mean, and it's in Vedic lore they talk about this as instant karma, that you can reach a point in your spiritual evolution that your karma, you're not waiting till the next life or even minutes. Your karma is instant. So if you do something that's out of alignment with your dharma, that you're going to instantly be aware of it. And I'll tell you what, that's when you're active in your spirituality, you get very, very clear with yourself, for sure, because it's impossible to work with these powers and not also be in tune with your emotions and your psychology and all of that. And so you do start to become very aware of when things are wrong. And then, I mean, yeah, once again, when especially when you've put magic into place and into action in your life, when you know that you need to change something, I mean, it's going to get changed one way or another. I would always suggest to take the easy route and do the work yourself right away.
Yeah. I wonder how many people will actually do that. How many of us actually do that versus learning the hard way? But it's not many of us.
No. Well, so, and there's a whole concept of enlightenment. Okay, so that at some point you become enlightened, and then from thenceforth you are enlightened. And no, it's not like that. It's like little shots. It's like a little zap that you get. You go, oh, whoa, and then you go back to just being a bum on the couch. But you have these moments, and the idea is to try to reach those more often and to bring them more into your daily life and all of that, and that's cool. But I mean, the whole thing is that the whole idea of ascent is that it's an ongoing process. That there is no end goal. That the end goal is the journey itself. And so, as you're doing this, I mean, one of the biggest things that I think people could stop doing that would make their magical practice and their lives go a lot better is stop being so hard on yourself. Like, you know, if you're not feeling like you're getting scrying for the moment, that's okay. Just, you know, and you don't have to buckle down. I'll tell you what, I spent, when I was trying to learn how to scry specifically, I would spend hours in front of my scrying mirror until my eyes, I couldn't even look at the physical world. My eyes were just blurry. And I mean, I was straining myself, and I didn't see a damn thing until I gave up and went, oh, okay. Oh, wow. All right. Now it comes to life. And if one of the sayings that I have is with magic, if you're trying too hard. So you just be with it. And that's part of the dancing thing with Vaudin definitely taught me, and just letting go of yourself and stop. You know, you're not looking at the clock waiting for the spirit to come. You're creating a connection and a relationship. So
it's kind of trust you know what you're doing without overthinking it too much. Yeah, it's interesting because I scry best at nighttime in car windows. That's where I scry best. I can have a proper ornate mirror. It won't work as well as scrying in car mirrors.
I bet that's pretty disconcerting for the person sitting inside the car. Whatever.
Maybe. What's that in the window? Nothing. You can't remember.
Right? Oh, what is she looking at?
We're all journeying together. It's just that we're doing it a bit differently to you.
It's interesting that you say that, though, because one of the first times I started actually seeing things develop in that was on a trip I made at night to Arizona. It was snowing, and so it's just a wall of white snow, and I'm seeing the reflection on the windshield of the interior of the car, and so I'm looking at that, and then sort of seeing things develop that were very, very interesting. But it's interesting that you say that, because I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, that was probably the first experience I had with actually seeing something in a mirror. Was not a mirror at all, but a car window. So
possibly because the active mind is busy, so then it allows for things to come through a little bit better. So yeah.
No, that's interesting, because that's something a lot of artists have pinned into, and even scientific thinkers have turned on to, is that you'll solve the problem when you're not really trying to solve the problem. So you'll go get in the shower, and you're taking a shower, and it's like, oh yeah, there it is. You're keeping the active mind busy, because there is a super conscious mind within us that seems to know a lot more than we consciously give it credit for. And so you keep the conscious mind busy with things, and then some amazing stuff can pop out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're about at time before Zoom will start disconnecting us. So is there anything you just want to let people know that you're doing, kind of plug, talk about your Viking course, where people can find your books, that sort of thing, before we finish up?
No, for sure. So got this book, Magic of the Vikings. We've only done 100 copies of this. You can get it. You can't buy the book. You cannot buy it. You can only get it by signing up for the Viking Pathworking course. So go to becomealivinggod.com/Viking and check that out. Start watching it now, and we'll send this book out to you completely free.
There you go.
Awesome.
And you can presumably find all your other bits and pieces through Become a Living God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you just go to Become a Living God, the main page, you're going to find a lot. And I'll tell you what, it's ramping up next year as well. We've got, Darren's going to be doing a lot of work with us, and we've got a lot of different authors and artists that are coming on board. This is Become a Living God is really cool, because it really is a movement that is being created by the magicians themselves. Like I'm hopefully a guy that can give some really cool tools, but Become a Living God is not even me or Timothy at this point. It's all of these magicians that have come together. Like, they have taken it over, really. And in a good way, they're dictating what I do. All of the magicians who come together, they're saying, hey, can you do a course on this? Or could you address this? And, oh yeah, absolutely. I was told when I started this, an emperor does not rule his empire, an emperor serves his empire. And so, yeah, and absolutely, I'm in service to everybody. So I'm doing some amazing things, and the others that are coming on to Become a Living God are doing some amazing things to bring people, hopefully, what they're asking for. So the next couple of years are going to be crazy cool, though.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on and talking to me about magic today. And thank you guys for joining me and watching this video. And that's it for today. So until next time, many blessings and stay fluxy.